Thanks a lot. Right, good morning everybody. Welcome everybody, and if we've got the press here, welcome. And can I also welcome our Corporate Director, Beate Wagner, of Children and Young People Services, who's joined the meeting as a representative of the management team rather than for a specific agenda item. I'd just like to make a few comments, please, first of all. I'd like to sort of say I'm very aware in my role, obviously, of being in contact with schools and obviously social work teams, and it's been a fantastic the job that they have done since obviously everybody's come back since September, although I know the social work teams and schools have been working through the summer holidays, getting everything ready. And I do have to sort of say that I was thinking back last night about what my career, there's different things I'd experienced, and I think the list went to fog, snow, flooding, bomb scare, oil workers strike, and one major fire. And when I think I've spoken to the head teachers of the schools I'm involved with and the social workers as well, I don't think anything that I experienced in my career has anything to do but the challenges that have been faced by all those people, certainly since last March. I'd never experienced anything like that, but they have responded, I'd have to say, to the high standards. However, when I'm seeing attendance rates now at 80%, when they should be around the 95, 96%, I have to be concerned. I'm concerned about the potential repeat of delays in decision making on whether exams will be taking place. You know, disruption is significant, and I'm hearing of large numbers of year 11s being absent either with COVID or self-isolating. And I really would be saying that the government does need to act soon and make decisions so that schools can plan for the assessment of young people at 16 and 18, as well as those of age 11. And I'd also like to say that on one particular concern is that pupils' access to IT, and the government did promise large numbers of laptops, but very few have been delivered. And I'm told by teachers that dependency on online learning is not the panacea, because obviously there's not enough laptops and there's still IT poverty, I think, in our district. But I am pleased to say, I'm very proud of our authority and of cross-party, that we have all agreed by and large to ensure that some of our finance from our capital grants is actually going to be turned into laptops for young people. And likewise, it's also great to note that the fantastic response from companies who have also come forward to donate their laptops, spare laptops and iPads and so forth. So it's a really good community spirit. So that for me is my opening remarks. Beate, would you like to say anything about the Ofsted visit that came a few weeks ago, please?
Yes, before I do, if I could just also welcome the initiative and everybody's efforts around the laptop campaign. It's actually something that's very dear to the heart of our youth parliament as well. So if anybody out there either has a laptop or knows of a company or other people who would like to donate a laptop, if you could get in touch with my office, with Lynn Gascoigne, we will make sure it gets to the right place. The arrangements in place for those laptops to be wiped and made safe for children and young people, and they can then be given out to those who require a laptop. So also really want to support the whole council initiative on that, and welcome any support from any members here or members of the public. Okay, so in terms of the focused visit that the authority had from Ofsted, took place between the 3rd and the 5th of November. It was part of Ofsted's focused visit programme since they've restarted in around October time. Typically 3 days, which is what we had, and we had 5 inspectors, including one inspector was specifically focusing on schools. The purpose of the visit, particularly to look at local authorities' response to COVID and how decision making during the crisis had continued to keep children safe. but also to comment on our improvement journey. The formal letter will be published on the 18th of December, so that's where we will get the formal and final feedback from Ofsted's finding. Informal feedback has been that Ofsted have been pleased with the way the authority has kept a line of sight on children during the crisis. You had at your last meeting the beginning really of a presentation that describes that to members of this committee in more detail, and I know there is a second part to that today. So again, hopefully members feel that they understand what that has involved in detail. But it certainly involved a good dialogue between schools, early help staff, social workers, and community organisations to make sure that most vulnerable children were still getting support in an effective way and not missed during the crisis. And Ofsted very much recognised that. We were pleased to hear in the verbal feedback that they felt we had continued to make improvements, and despite COVID, and hadn't been distracted, and particularly the strength of some of the services in the MASH in particular, and the improvements in our assessments. Still work to be done, and we're always grateful for getting challenge back and helping us understand where we still need to make further improvements. Ofsted very much agreed with our own assessment on those areas, and they include further work to really embed our neglect toolkit so that everybody understands and is able to respond increasingly effectively to situations of neglect. Further work to be done on embedding our new way of running personal education plans for children in care. We have a new system in place which puts us in a position to respond far more effectively and focus much more on educational outcomes. But it's early days and we've got more to do to embed that. And a specific focus on care leavers, where again we've got a good care leaver offer, a really good website now, but we want to do a lot more to improve that a lot more. And again, Ofsted agreed with us that was an area for further improvement. So that's probably the main areas of sort of verbal feedback we had. As I say, more detail when the letter is published, which we expect on the 18th of December. Is that okay?
Sorry, Matt, I was on mute. Do you want to mention anything about Saturday's event, Beate, for young people?
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. So one of the, in fact, one of the areas Ofsted praised was the engagement of our young people. I've already mentioned one of the young people's campaigns jointly with the council around laptops, but other campaigns that young people have run, like the mystery shopper exercise in the MASH, where Ofsted could see that young people had had an idea and have actually developed an action, and that's made a difference to the way we run services. Our young people last year had a big summit called the Build Our Future Summit, which was very successful, contributed really to where we now are in terms of participation. And this year's summit was going to be held in May, but was unfortunately couldn't go ahead because of the lockdown at that time. Is now happening this Saturday between 10:30 and 12:30. Our Build Our Future Summits, senior leaders from the authority joining young people who've organised this as their opportunity to exchange ideas, challenge us, formulate new campaigns they want to run, and highlight to us the issues that are important to them. So if anybody's interested or knows of any young people, then the contact person is Elaine Armstrong within the local authority, or again, if people don't have the contact details, contact either my office or Lynn Gascoigne.
All right, thanks, Beate. Celia, do you want to make a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Beate, It all sounds very positive, and I was just wondering about the neglect toolkit, which I don't know how in depth it is, but I was wondering, does that go across, or can other professional groups such as the police and health visitors, etc., can they access this, or is it just for social workers?
No, it's a toolkit that is for the whole of the partnership. So absolutely, it needs to be shared and it needs to be used by all of the professionals so that you can it can help you understand the degree of neglect and the impact of neglect at a very low level as well as quite a high level. So it is a shared tool. There's a lot of training still ongoing, which focuses on different I suppose complexities. So we have got some specific training for social workers, but there's also multi-agency training for all of the different professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thanks, Beate, thanks, Celia. I think it's important to say as well, sort of looking at things, that, you know, one of the key things I've seen is the importance in terms of the rebuilding of the relationships with schools, and in turn that's obviously the relationships with social workers. And I think, you know, we have to thank Beate, because this was a major challenge, and I've seen lots and lots of different things that have had to be done over the last couple of years, and the fortitude that's involved in that is significant of what's been needed. And obviously, yes, it's great to praise the way in which things have gone, and Ofsted are identifying things, but equally a major strength is knowing where the weaknesses are as well, and going on and chasing those weaknesses. So I think, thank you very much for that, Beate. Right, Cynthia, you've made a comment. I was at a meeting last night with young people, and they showed us the Care Leavers website that they've been developing, which looked excellent. So thank you for that, Cynthia. Right, so shall we get into the meat of the meeting now? Right, apologies. Catherine, have you got any apologies to give?
Yes, Chair, I've got apologies from Monica Graham and from Keith Garforth. Can I just point out that Keith can't access the meeting via Skype, but he is listening via the website. And finally, Stuart Piper, he'll be joining the meeting late, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And Sally Kincaid's at the schools forum, so she'll try and pop into it as and when she can. Right, so are there any members' declarations of interest? I'll take silence as being the case. Can we therefore go on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the Children, Young People and Skills Committee on the 29th of October, which is agenda pages 1 to 9. We'll just sort of go through, and I'll take silence as being that people agree with them. Okay, so if we can go to page 1, page 2, page 4, page 5, page 6. Can I pick up on page 6, item 17, please, on corporate parenting? We did pick up in the press on Monday some reference to children who were in care and outside the district, and so we did ask for a response on that. So I'm going to read this piece out. The number of children in care in Wakefield at the present time is 640. 253 of these children are placed outside the Wakefield district. In Wakefield, we believe that our children should be cared for whenever possible in or near to Wakefield. We always aim to make sure Wakefield children in care remain in the area. However, there will be times when this is not possible. There is a rise in the number of children in care both regionally and nationally. This means an increase in demand for placements, and at a national and local level, this shortage of placements means a greater reliance and use of external foster care and residential provision. Although placement sufficiency in Wakefield is increasing, we still require external placements for some of our children and young people. Where an external placement is required, we work hard to return them back to Wakefield as soon as possible. For some young people, a placement outside of Wakefield may be in their best interest. Again, this is continual review to make sure this is in the right plan in order to improve their outcomes. Meeting the needs of children in care climate can present some significant challenges. In response to this, Wakefield has a sufficiency strategy that recognises the need for increased placement options. As a partnership, we are working hard to ensure, wherever possible, Wakefield children are placed in the local area and ideally with Wakefield foster carers. So can I thank Cheryl Whitehouse for that explanation, please? Are there any other issues? So I'll take it that that is acceptable. Okay. Any comments on any matters arising? Catherine, did you want to say something? Okay. Oh, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've asked about the business of the numbers of children in care outside the district on several occasions over the months, as you know, and it did appear fairly early on that there were few, if any, placed outside the district. We're now up to a third, and it does concern me because I take what's been said, and I understand that wherever possible, children should be placed in care where provision is available within the district. But that's a lot of children, and particularly now under the COVID situation, actually managing the contacts with those children. I know that there's been arrangements to be done remotely, is a huge challenge, and it does concern me somewhat. And I wondered how we compare with similar authorities, and also the number of children from other authorities currently placed in Wakefield, because this does the fact that we've got 253 out of 640, that's a significant number.
Right, thanks Andy for that. I think it may well be that we'll go on a little bit further about that. Catherine, do you want to come in?
Yes, please. I agree with you on that subject, but I do know of 2 families who have got long-term foster children with them, that's been with them years, and they've moved out of the district, but because these children are part of their family, they wanted those children to move with them. So that is part of those children will be part of this number. So that's what's got to be taken into consideration as well.
Okay, I'll draw a line at that at this point, as we can pick this one up later with Vicky's item. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a little while. Right, can we move on, please? You'll be pleased to know as well that we will be having a break after this one, so there will be a 10-minute break after item 6. Okay, so there's no urgent items, so we'll go on to agenda item 6 now, which is Wakefield Families Together update. There's no written report. The committee previously received a presentation about Wakefield Families Together July 19. The aim was for the council to organise itself better and co-locate and integrate with partners and schools to provide early intervention, early help and children's social care in support of all families, not just the children. At that time it was reported that changes would start to be implemented in April 2020. So I'd like to welcome Anne-Marie Spencer, who's the Programme Manager, to provide an update on the current progress. Anne-Marie, can you start to get your PowerPoint up on screen for us, please?
I can. Thank you very much, Chair. So I've been leading on Wakefield Families Together since its inception, and today I'm going to take you through that development to try and highlight the progress which has been significant within the last year and a half of this programme, and to start to share with you some of those programmes, where we are now and what we're still currently working on and need to develop further. So this whole initiative stems from work that's been taking place that underpins the Children and Young People's Plan. This is very much the delivery arm of meeting those outcomes set out in that plan, to enable us to work far more closely with our partners and to integrate and co-locate with partners so that we can streamline the system, remove duplication, and be able to provide families with more timely services that are joined up at the earliest point of need. Part of the early work that took place was very much focused on developing that shared vision with partners, which culminated in the plan on the page for Wakefield Families Together, that very much focuses on the outcomes of supporting families to be resilient and thrive in their communities, to provide every child with the best start in life, to support families and their children to have improved emotional health and well-being, and to ensure that children receive an inclusive education and transition into further education, employment and adulthood. And those have been the key drivers as part of our partnership development within this programme that help us keep sighted on those ambitions that we want to achieve as part of that work. Everyone agreed to this plan, and from that they have worked tirelessly to realign many of their services to support this ambition so that every child is happy, healthy and safe across our district. Part of that early journey...
Anne-Marie, sorry,
yeah.
Anne-Marie, your slides are quite small. Could you run the actual slideshow? That will make them slightly bigger. If you go from the beginning, yeah.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Great. You will have seen from earlier presentations that one of the first pieces of work was to configure ourselves in 6 cluster areas around schools, and how the pressures that were in children's social care, the demand in the system, and how we could align and work with partner organisations. And that helped us to start to set the framework for our cluster areas, and this has progressed significantly in starting to shape up what those cluster areas start to look like. So there are 6 cluster areas across the district, and from that in Wakefield Central in the northwest, the southwest, Normanton and Featherstone, the southeast, Castleford and Airedale, and Pontefract and Nottingley, we have started to align teams not only in the council across children's social care, children first, early help teams and education, but also with our partner organisations in the 0 to 19 health service, with the police, and with a number of other partners who have started to align to this footprint so that we can localise our services more and be clear on who's the partnership around the child and family within each of these 6 geographical areas. So 1 year on, where are we? As you can see, significant work has taken place. We agreed the plan on the page. People have aligned themselves to that 6 cluster area model. There's still some slight tail end of that, but by and large, we have integrated structures developing for each of the 6 areas that highlight what those teams look like. We've launched the map. We have a communication strategy in place, supported by new branding for Wakefield Families Together, so it's easily identifiable for families, children and young people, and the partnership have fully embraced this branded model to use on their communications with families. We've secured capital funding of 2.45 million to support us to relocate within integrated teams. Some of that will be existing local authority premises, Wakefield District housing premises, or new builds across the district. That programme of works has started. There's a project team in place, and we are starting to in some of those cluster areas, look at a model of when we can move in and integrate with partner agencies. These bases will be fundamental to supporting closer working relationships as children's social care sit alongside the police, sit alongside health, sit alongside other partners across the district. That first base we anticipate to come online will be Featherstone Town Hall in January of next year, shortly followed by the Cedars Business Centre. One of the big areas that I'm going to take you through this morning is the transformation of our early help offer around 3 new delivery models that support children from 0 to 18 across that spectrum, and then that transition into adulthood. We've done significant work on these models with a highly successful pilot programme, followed by a launch, and I will take you through that in more detail shortly. We've also started to have those integrated cluster-based meetings where leadership teams are coming together. We've had one successful induction programme in the Normanton and Featherstone area, where 76 staff from across the partnership attended, so that we can start to learn more about each other, how we do our business, and how we will come back to a team. Alongside that, children and young people have supported us to create a podcast sharing the principles and values of how they would like us to work with them, with their family and each other. We've also started some early conversations around how we are supported through this development with our commissioning processes. So part of that process was the redesign of early help. What you can see in front of you is a pathway that supports more timely referral processes, timely discussions and timely allocation of cases to the most appropriate service by the team who can deliver and work with the family, supported by our integrated colleagues. So I'll take you through each one in turn, starting with the team around the early years, which were children 0 to 5, then the team around the school from school-aged children up to 18, and then finally the team around the family, which is a more targeted intervention for those children either not in school or on the point of transition from children's services to adult services. So the team around the early years is made up of a dedicated team working closely with the private, voluntary and independent sector, led by the Children First team and the early years area Senko, working with the health visitor. Dedicated meetings are being organised in each of the 6 cluster areas for any provider that has a concern about a child to be able to access support, have conversations, get guidance, direction, provided with interventions for families in a more timely and more immediate process. We had a really successful pilot in the southeast of the district. 20 partners attended the evaluation of that event who had been involved. We had a launch on the 19th of November with 55 PVI providers attending that launch, so that we can start to roll out this model from December and make strengthened links with other wider services who have a key role to play, whether that is the speech and language specialists, Portage, Wakefield District Housing, Home Start. We are continuing to strengthen the links so that we have a joined up successful offer to families. 18 children were discussed, 9 of those were brought to the meeting, the others were supported through advice and guidance. The feedback was extremely positive around the partnership and how well that partnership worked, and the opportunity it gave partners working with those PVI settings to kind of further develop the model so that we can ensure that it's fit for purpose, and providers are telling us that it was easy to access, that it helped them to get the services they needed sooner, and that families benefited and welcomed that more immediate support. The information sharing was key to providing the underpinning information to ensure the right package of support was provided. We're looking to roll that out in December. There's further work to do to join up some of the integrated reviews that take place for 2.5-year-old young children, and meetings have taken place to look at how we can integrate that within this model. Equally, we've worked with the health visiting team to link in with the GPs and midwives to ensure, again, there is a pathway in for them to access this support. There's some further work to do with childminders that we will be taking forward. So the TAEY, the team around the early years, we will continue to monitor and review this at 3 monthly points over 2021 to ensure that the model continues to do the job we need it to do and remains fit for purpose. The second model was the team around the school, highly ambitious, a significant programme, significant change for how we work with schools. Every school across the district now has a Children First Early Help Link worker and a Link social worker. The team that we've brought together is very much focused around early help, prevention and intervention, working with school nurses and the Future in Mind emotional health and wellbeing teams. Again, the focus is very much on early conversations to streamline the referral and allocation process. The pilot ran for 4 months from July to October. 9 schools across the district were involved. We've linked up with another significant programme in running it in education around the inclusion programme. Really successful evaluation with 39 partners, and the launch event took place on the 20th of November with 120 schools and partners attending, and we're looking to implement this in January 2021. The feedback from schools was very positive. The comments and thoughts of those schools was that this process enables us to have those early conversations. First time schools have said they felt that they were not alone. They had access to information that enabled a more joined up approach to how we work together. It removed those hurdles. They felt that by sharing the expertise, it actually addressed some of those capacity issues because problems were being shared. Moving away from the multi-agency referral form into the MASH enabled, again, more timely processes to work in how we work with schools, very much driven by the Link Children First worker. And they were learning far more about wider services that are available across our communities that they can tap into to support families. So on the data, 66 children were brought to those meetings, and through those conversations, a significant number of those cases continue to be held by schools with support from partner agencies. Again, we've strengthened this model by bringing in an educational component, and we're still modelling out what that looks like in the delivery model that includes the emotional health and wellbeing arm, and we're working towards gathering this regular feedback when we look to full implementation as part of this programme. But the benefits that schools are telling us that this programme has, and the potential that it has to continue to develop, grow, innovate as we embed it, is significant in how we work with our schools across the district. The final programme that's in development is the team around the family, very much focused on those high-end stuck cases in the system, focusing on transition, focusing on those complex cases that will escalate into more costly statutory services. We're looking at bringing the first meeting together on the 2nd of December in a pilot process, and we will be looking to evaluate this process. It will help us to identify where we have gaps in the system and what else we may need to do, and may lead to some of the different commissioning arrangements to support some of those gaps that are identified. So it will involve senior leaders across our partner organisations to take this particular piece of work forward. It's again an exciting opportunity that's very much needed around some of those cases that need more creative solutions to very complex situations. So what next? All of this will culminate in a revised early help strategy, very much focused on prevention and intervention, very much linking with community anchors and the voluntary sector, and starting to really build on the work that's taking place across the district within the social prescribing delivery approach. There's more work to do to align our mental health delivery and bringing together all of those services, both voluntary and statutory, that have a role to play within emotional health and wellbeing, to ensure that we complement each other and build on that offer and remove some of that duplication as we simplify the work that we do. There's more work to do with children, young people and families to continue to seek their feedback, to help us shape the services as we roll those out, because our final aim is really about removing that duplication, overlaps in the system, and the more we can understand and work with partners, the more we can progress a really comprehensive model of practice across children's services with our partner organisations. That's very much underpinned by integrated induction and learning development offers and integrated protocols, procedures, and how we share information. So that brings us back to the Children and Young People's Plan, to ensure that the line of sight and accountability for the work that takes place is very much reported back through the Wakefield Families Together steering group and then to the membership of the Children's and Young People's Board. So thank you. I know I've given a lot of information there. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that very detailed presentation, Anne-Marie. Obviously, as Councillor Swift asked if we could have that sent, obviously I know Lynn's got a copy of it, and that will be sent out to all members, but it was a very detailed presentation. I'll go first, but I know obviously I can see questions from Stuart and from Kathy, but I'll just make a few comments. I am really delighted to see that you have gone down the road of increasing the number of bases around the district. I was concerned at the time when they were reduced in numbers, so I really do welcome that particular initiative of being able to get back into the community, because I know how important that is. So that for me is a very important step forward. One question in particular, the teams around the early years and the teams around the schools, they obviously will work with quite close together in terms of age ranges. If there is a child of a family causing concern in the TAEY, and then obviously there are children on the TAS side, how are you going to be able to ensure that the two teams are talking to each other, please, Anne-Marie?
Right, so those teams are very much led by our Children First coordinators and leads, and where we are working within whole family work. So when early years providers or schools identify a concern in the family and the family agree that they would like support from either one of those two teams, when checks are made on social care systems, we do look at the whole family. So where we have children that are either younger or older, we can ensure that that work is joined up as part of that process, so that we would have conversations in the right place. So if the need is very much identified through schools, we would link with the early years provider and vice versa to ensure that everyone understands that bigger piece of work that's taking place. As part of embedding the process, we will need to do more work on that area. We will need to ensure that the programme is fit for purpose and that the communication is taking place so that we don't have any children falling through the gaps.
Right, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. I'll stop asking my questions now because I can see there's a queue already building up. Stuart, would you like to pose your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Reading this document we've been issued, I wrote this down the other day. And I know that you've touched on it in your opening remarks, Chair, and I know Beate has spoken about it when she gave information to the meeting. But, this is what I wrote, question, with the increased workload on staff in schools due to COVID-19, is this extra workload having an adverse effect on the quality of the functions we provide for school, i.e. safeguarding of children? And what my question is, do we have, I know you've identified that there could be a problem in the link between schools and other partners, but what my concern is that the school teachers and staff of all levels staff they're having extra work to do, whether it's meals in the morning, checking up on COVID, etc., etc. So are we monitoring the staff in this link between schools and other partners? Because of the COVID situation, an extra workload that people are having to work, do, including teachers and staff, are we monitoring that link, to make sure there's not a breakdown in the link between the schools and partners? That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks, Stuart. I think, Beate, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think what's happened during the crisis, really from the very beginning, is some of the work that Anne-Marie described was already in train, but actually it's been an opportunity to really strengthen the links very, very quickly. So it's sort of, if you like, sped up some of those developments. Schools have throughout commented how they supported they felt by the local authority through this crisis, and I think that the fact that people are now working in team arrangements means that we can be much more flexible. So if a school is under pressure and they can't do some of the early help work that they would normally do, actually there's now a team behind them who can make up for that to an extent, and we can be a lot more flexible because we now have those arrangements in place. So I feel we're much stronger than we were, and I think we are in as good a place as we can be, given there's pressures on all staff and impact on shielding and all of those other issues that impact on staff. I feel that the team really makes us much stronger.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Kathy, your question, please.
Yeah, I just wondered, with the Team Around initiative about the contacts, the partnerships with schools, is that equally with the academies as well as the local authority run schools?
Yes, yeah. There is an offer for every school across the district to be able to be supported through the Team Around the School model. So the majority of the schools that were involved in the pilot were academies at secondary level. We did pilot it with the one maintained secondary school, and we have a good mixture. So there's no difference in that offer, whether it's maintained or academy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy, over to you.
Thank you. This isn't my day job, and so I'm looking at it in terms of how understandable it is. If you're clearly working in the Xamarin, then you'll have an understanding of how things fit together because of the jigsaw there. But we talk in terms of clusters and hubs, and there's a variety of different ways of cutting up the district and making provision for health and education, social services, police, etc. I wonder how this description of this organisation that you've made today fits in with what we currently have and how understandable it is. I think Stuart has made the point with regard to the current workload on staff already in schools. How clearly understandable is this organisation and the provision that's available through it to the users? I find it a little bit mind-blowing that we do segment the district in terms of health and education and other things, in terms of hubs, clusters, etc. And perhaps there ought to be some sort of a schema that's provided that shows how all this fits together, because I do find it tricky to get my head around it.
Yeah. And that's understandable. You know, it is a huge transformation program. I think from the start of this, we have communicated regularly with our education colleagues, with our partners. Through the steering group, we have a number of operational groups so that our partner organisations, the voluntary sector, have been part of those processes. So as we've developed and built on each layer of the programme, we've been able to take them with us. As we start to localise more, we do need to ensure that we are targeting those localised messages to help service users understand what's happening in the local community and what that offer looks like and how they can access support, you know, to enable them to get the most out of this. For schools and early years providers, we're in the process of writing a quite needle to thread guidance document that in plain English that helps them understand that process and what it means to them. But all of this is very much supported by that dialogue on the ground. You know, our whole ambition is to have local conversations. So the link workers attached to every school, they're having conversations with schools to share what this programme means and how it works and how they can access it, so that we can understand any questions that they may have and be able to deal with them. Likewise, within the early years arena, we have a team of early years development officers, and they're working with providers to share the programme, how it works. So we have tried to I suppose, put a number of different strategies in place to try and support people to get the most out of what we're building as part of this process. But it is an ongoing communication programme that we need to ensure continually goes out to people to be able to access the provision.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Beate, do you want to add anything?
Just a couple of things. The reason we have organised ourselves in clusters is just so that people locally, professionals locally, can really get to know each other in smaller teams. They are still linking up through the steering group, and we still make sure that it's coordinated with each other. The one thing, if you look at this from the school's perspective, the one thing schools are getting, and we're relying on schools really as the agency that know children best because they see them much more than any of us. What schools are getting is a named person in early help and a named social worker, so that they know who to talk to, who to seek advice, and then the team around that are just other professionals that can be pulled in. So whilst it might look complicated, actually when you look at it from the user side, it's probably a lot more straightforward. It was one of the first things that was asked me for when I started was, could we not have a named person so we know who we're talking to, we can build a relationship and we can make sure we're as effective as we can be together. So but it's helpful to get the feedback, because I think what we will take from that is just to make sure that we simplify some of this so it's easier to understand.
Thank you. That's better. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Kevin, do you want to come in with your comment, please?
Yeah, very little to add to what I've jotted down in the chat box, actually. It was just to follow previous speakers of saying that I find it quite difficult to work out how the whole thing fits together and who does what. And sometimes the most difficult thing is who doesn't do something, you know, and they quite often I've kind of lingered for quite long periods of time under complete misapprehensions about thinking a particular strand of work fell within a particular area. And I think that giving titles like Families Together to a programme, while it might kind of embody quite nicely what the aspiration is of the people involved, certainly to anybody any outsider, it doesn't explain what they do at all, because titles like that could apply to quite a number of totally different programmes, you know, that really are not the same at all as what we're talking about here. So, as I say, a need sometimes for, to put it the other way around, that what it says on the tin should actually kind of reflect what's inside and reflect what people do, and not simply a kind of a slogan style title. You know, you're not looking for an advertising message. I think a lot of the time you're looking for clarity of communication.
Right, thank you for that comment, Kevin. I think it may well be that we and Lynn don't have a drop with me. I think it might be useful to have an update sometime in March actually on this one, so that we could see how progress is going. And it may well be, Kevin, that obviously being able to look at the PowerPoint in more detail, that might help a little bit. So obviously when that sort of comes out, you come back, no doubt. If you want to ask any further questions, Kevin, you can do through the usual route. I know Andy wants to come back in, but I want to sort of come in and ask a question about the early years element of it. We've got 3 maintained nurseries in Wakefield, and I've no idea how many private nurseries there are. Is there any work that actually engages with the private nurseries, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, so the whole of the TAEY model is targeted at those voluntary, private, voluntary and independent sector. So any of the nursery provision will fall within scope of the team around the early years model, linking through the development officers and the offer that we have from the early years area Senkos. Their day-to-day work is out and about in all of those sectors, linking in with those providers, having those conversations, helping them to identify where there may be concerns to kind of join up that conversation. So they're all part of that same offer.
Right. So on the slide it says building the team around the early years. When it says evaluation attended by 20 partners and launch attended by 55, you're actually referring to private providers there, then, are you?
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
I think it's important that's possibly clarified in that area, because it is something obviously which is always going to be concerned, because personally, obviously, I'd like as many maintained nurseries as possible, and I think it is important that that is seen as being an important part as well. So thank you for that. Andy, over to you.
Just thank you. Yeah, just an extra little consideration in terms of clarity of understanding, and Kevin makes a good point with regard to the clarity of what's going on. You mentioned about the third sector, the voluntary sector, the provision that's made by the volunteer organisations that have to bid in on a fairly regular basis. And we as a committee have discussed some time ago the fact that there has to be a regular reapplication by some of these organisations. So sometimes there's quite a bit of movement in the providers. And if you have some movement with the providers for that section, it's vital, isn't it, that there's a clarity of understanding for them. This ever changing, the schools and the school staff are going to be there for a long time, and it does concern me that perhaps that area on which we depend quite considerably, the voluntary sector, if there are changing providers, they also need to have this clarity of message. And perhaps by March we can have some kind of a better understanding of how that's going ahead.
Yeah, I'm quite happy for that. Yeah, that is a huge challenge in the system. You know, there is work to build, piece of work that Nova is undertaking on building the website on all provision across the district for adults and children in one place, so that people can access information in their local community around any specific area of concern that would feed into that. And that's something, again, through Wakefield Families Together, we are building that model on. But through those local conversations and local placed working arrangements in the cluster areas, it does support people to understand the local community better and what's available in that community. And that may be new provision or provision that no longer has access to funding will come at that local level. But you're right, you know, we have to ensure that the messages around Wakefield Families Together are really clear for our families that are accessing them. And we will be producing podcasts which are using local people to explain how this system works and how it can be accessed, and the purpose of that system, to move away from, you know, what can be considered sometimes as advertising and banners, to try and make it more personal for families, and speaking directly to them so that they feel they can ask for that help when they're most in need.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions? Okay, right. Anne-Marie, thank you very much for your presentation, and obviously the slides will be distributed through to the committee, and obviously if we could have an update sometime in March, either a written report or a very brief verbal, I'd be very grateful for that. So thank you very much for that, and shall we have a 10-minute break, bearing in mind that we're only 4.5 minutes behind. So if we come back at 11:10, please. So if you could stop the camera, please, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. James, could we have the camera rolling again, please? Right, thank you, James. Right, welcome back, everybody. Can we now turn to agenda item 7, which is response to COVID-19, which is agenda pages 11 to 15. And this is, at the last meeting, the committee heard a presentation about the Safeguarding Children's Partnership response to COVID-19, which, due to time constraints, was not completed. Members didn't have the opportunity to ask questions. The report at agenda page 11 provides a summary of the presentation from last time. So I'd like to welcome Jonathan. Obviously, you are performing by yourself, I gather, this time, as Stephen is unable to attend today. So, Jonathan, Beate will be supporting you, but you are in the hot seat. So welcome once again, Jonathan.
Yeah, good morning, Councillor Jones and the committee. Yes, I'm ready to start. Am I okay in presenting the presentation
Yes.
once more? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
I'll just do that now.
And obviously as big as possible, please.
Yeah, certainly. So hopefully that is coming up on screen if it hasn't already done so.
Yeah, we're back up.
Brilliant. Okay.
Jonathan, if you can run the this as a slideshow, then it always comes up slightly bigger.
Yeah, no, will do, Beata. Just before I do so, Councillor Jones, so just to recap quickly, we obviously went through half of this presentation during the meeting in October time. So if it's okay with you and the panel, I will start from slide 11, which I think was where we paused from. But I just wanted to check that that was okay before presenting.
Yeah, just very quickly, yeah, because we do obviously need to push on, but yeah, please.
That's great. Yeah, okay. Fab. So I hope that slide 11 has now come up as a presentation. So very quickly, in terms of the recap as to where we got to, we ran through what the Wakefield Safeguarding Partnership is, some of the particular elements in which the partnership has put in place in terms of arrangements in relation to safeguarding children through the pandemic. We ran through the response from children's services within the local authority, and I then started to share the responses from health partners, and we took a pause with West Yorkshire Police. So if I can pick up where we left off in October time. So the response from West Yorkshire Police was very much and continues to be business as usual. So in terms of the delivery of services for children at risk in relation to safeguarding has continued in the normal manner in which we would expect our police colleagues to deliver upon. In terms of the technology, this probably doesn't come as much of a surprise, but West Yorkshire Police, like many other services, have really looked to maximise the use of technology to ensure that those multi-agency meetings, such as the daily risk assessment meet, abbreviated as the RAM meetings on that second point in the presentation, and in order to also maintain attendance at initial child protection conferences and strategy meetings, police colleagues are very much being part of that adaptation and using technology to ensure that those meetings can take place. I think a really positive development, and I don't think this was just COVID related, because I think there's a broader need for this work, not just in Wakefield but also in neighbouring local authority areas, is the work that West Yorkshire Police have carried out with our local authority children homes, but also private providers, in ensuring that there's a support there in place to manage those vulnerable children through the lockdown and restriction periods, but particularly ensuring that those providers understand their responsibilities when it comes to potentially those children going missing from home, and the emphasis on those providers working in close partnership with the police. I know that colleagues are really pleased with how that work has developed during the lockdown and restriction period. There's been further partnership work between neighbourhood policing and youth offending team officers. They've worked in double crewed vehicles, and again that support has been around young people to deal with those types of related calls. There's that continued partnership work through early help provision around the locality hub model. And I know that you had a presentation from Anne-Marie Spencer in relation to Wakefield Families Together, and the police are clearly a key partner within that work, within the cluster model and the team around a school and team around early years. And what is really helpful, that we've now established a solid data set that the police are providing in relation to offences against children. So colleagues within the Wakefield area for the police, but also in the Safeguarding Governance Unit that serves the region for West Yorkshire, has really provided some insightful data around young people that are at risk of child exploitation, including sexual exploitation and county lines and criminal exploitation. Some of the changes and adaptations those perpetrators are looking to utilise within the restriction and lockdown periods to ensure that the services that partner with the police are briefed on those, and then also around the disruption activity as well. So what are the police doing to minimise that harm against children where there are those adult perpetrators? So I think that data is being fed through to some of our governance subgroups. So that includes the Safeguarding Effectiveness group and our multi-agency child exploitation group. I alluded to the structure in October time in terms of some of those groups. So one tool that we used during the initial lockdown phase, so lockdown 1.0 as it's now being referred to in some quarters, so between March and July time, we in Wakefield wanted to ensure that we were able to track from a data perspective those children that were eligible for a school place. What site did we have around those children, not just from a school perspective, but all of those services that provide that wider support as well. So the Safeguarding Vulnerability Tracker tool, that was very much a way in which, from a data perspective, the partnership was able to seek assurance from services that children and families who needed the most support were able to access that and were cited when there was those challenges posed to services, and particularly where there was a reduction in school attendance. So early years and school places, as I've alluded to, were offered to all vulnerable children, and it wasn't just those children that were subjected to statutory intervention, so child in need, child protection and child in care plans, but we widened the remit around vulnerable children to include those who were open to early help and children first hubs as well. So where this data was really valuable with the tracker was that it provided that quantitative analysis in terms of attendance of those children, and then with the locality cluster meetings, that data was taken to those meetings so we could discuss particular children and particular families where there were some barriers around attendance. That could have been something on the face of it that could have looked quite trivial. So for example, children or families not feeling confident around using public transport to access their school place. So what the tracker enabled us to do was provide that insight. We would then, within the locality cluster meetings, through the school improvement advisors, through the schools themselves, come to arrangements that then enabled the capacity that we had with our taxi providers and other private transport providers to ensure that we could fund that to then enable those children to access school. It was also then used, I suppose, to an extent on the other side of the spectrum, where schools were chasing those children and families and weren't getting a response back. So therefore then there was a need to ensure that those children were being referred into those locality cluster meeting discussions to be able to problem solve and ensure that those wider services such as social care, such as early help and our children first hubs, amongst some of our health providers as well, such as our healthy child team, were able again to reach out to those families too. And those 6 locality cluster meetings across the district were aligned to the secondary school pyramids and catchment areas. So that ensured that services were organised around the support for schools and the children they had on roll around that. So it wasn't adding another model into something that can be quite a complex landscape as it is. So just finishing off on tracker, and I've probably already summarised some of these points. So the actions were identified through the tracker, taken to the locality cluster meetings, and that's where areas of development were identified, and those plans were then put in place accordingly. And that included, as I mentioned, coordinated support for children and families during that first period, but also around the summer holidays as well. And I believe the committee has had a report from Melanie Robinson, or will be due to have a report from her around the think family approach looks like in terms of that linking with our voluntary sector partners around the summer holiday provision. And as part of that, summer holiday food and activities were provided via the Our Families, Our Future, and schools identified those children who may require additional support, and details were then shared with those link workers, the youth service and mental health services. So moving from the tracker, this was something else that we launched as a partnership, and this launched in April 2020, and it was a campaign to really put across a simple message that safeguarding is everyone's business, but to ensure that this campaign reached areas where typically those areas wouldn't normally work directly with children. So it was very much to raise awareness of child safeguarding and neglect amongst such as voluntary sector organisations, the general public, those kind of community volunteers, but also supermarket workers, delivery drivers, mail officers, etc. So on the next slide, I've got some examples of some of the material, but that was where the campaign produced posters, leaflets. There was a big campaign out on social media through various graphics and community advertising. And there was 3 key messages in which the campaign touched upon. So that was around ownership, spotting and reporting. So ensuring that everybody saw safeguarding as part of their community responsibility, that when they did come across some safeguarding concerns, they understood what they needed to be looking out for and understood that there was the increased potential for harm, and then how to report it. So where would people go when they have a concern? And so the campaign provided guidance on what to do if you have a concern, and with the contact details of the integrated front door stroke, the multi-agency safeguarding hub. And the children's services offer via the Our Family, Our Future programme was key in partnering with those community hubs to ensure that the voluntary sector were aware of this campaign and promoted the messages and content. And I think probably a nice measurement for the committee to be aware of came through from the recent Ofsted inspection, where what was commented was that our rates in terms of referrals into the integrated front door were actually stable throughout the pandemic. Now, nationally, and also with many of our neighbouring local authorities, that there was a massive drop off in terms of the amount of contacts that were being referred into the multi-agency safeguarding hubs, because typically children weren't being cited as often as they were. But Ofsted did make a comment that actually our referral rates and contact rates into the hub were stable throughout, and that is something that of course we are continuing to monitor. But I think that's quite a nice reflection that we were able to ensure that even though we were in very abnormal times, that we were able to ensure that those messages around safeguarding were being maintained. And just very quick highlight of what some of those posters look like. Apologies, one of the graphics is a little bit blurry. There was a number of other resources that we did use as well. in terms of training for the workforce and what we did during the pandemic and what we're still continuing to do. Safeguarding Week is always a big week for the partnership, and that is always delivered kind of the last week of June. Clearly this time around we needed to adapt that to virtual delivery. What we found that there was a lot of upsides to this, and I think that moving forward, when we are able to have mass gatherings at some point, I think that we will still continue to have a hybrid approach around virtual e-learning, virtual conferences, because it minimises the need for a lot of people to travel to a building in terms of booking that out, all of the practicalities that come with a face-to-face conference. We found that we were able to really upscale in terms of the reach in which the conference delivered to. So it provided a wealth of workshops and support for those who work and volunteer with children to engage with, and we're produced by services across Wakefield and West Yorkshire. So in total there was around 80 learning opportunities that were delivered across that week, and that was a combination of live webinars, pre-recorded presentation, videos and podcasts, and that included but wasn't exclusive to some of the examples that I've listed just under that third slide there. The feedback that we received was overwhelmingly positive, and particularly the pre-recorded element enabled practitioners to view training on demand and share amongst their workforce. So where we found a real kind of uptake in that training was from our schools. You know, schools can't always release all of their staff to attend a conference. It tends to be typically a head teacher or a designated safeguarding lead that will then take those messages and then relay them back to their staff teams. What we found was, to an extent, we're cutting out the middle person within this, where if we're pre-recording briefings and we've got that live webinar element that we can record, we're able to then allow the workforce to access that on demand. And today there's just some statistics there. These have probably increased since they put this presentation together in October, but the videos combined have generated over 3,600 views. The website as well, in terms of the analytics that we've pulled from that, where all of the conference data sits, we've had well over 3 visits. 1,000 more visits when compared to June 2019 as well. So around our broader multi-agency e-learning, it's very typical in what I just mentioned really with the conference. What we did acknowledge, we've got a contract with the Virtual College that are a big national e-learning provider, and we purchased licenses. We knew that we needed to increase the number of licenses, and we did so. We increased those from March up to an extra 5,000 licenses, and that's enabled over 2,000 new users since March to courses via the Virtual College, and then a total of over 6,500 courses have been completed. And just looking at comparisons, there was a 145% increase in the number of courses completed between April and August 2020 than the entirety of 2019. So I think it's safe to say that we've picked up on the demand quickly that there would need to be for learning opportunities for staff. That would need to be online, and then we've met that need. And again, I've listed some of the examples of the Virtual College in which they provide. That's not an exclusive list there, but it does very much cover a lot of the core work that services need when it comes to safeguarding awareness and safeguarding training. Of what have we learned today? And I say today because we are still continuing. It's not just a case that we did something towards the end of June, July, and then we've kind of just sat on what we've done. But this is what we've picked up, and are continuing to implement now. So we noted that partnership working in Wakefield across services who work with children and families is and those watching that assurance. The flexible, rapid responding services within the district, adapting service delivery, I think should really be commended, because I think the quality in how that service delivery is being adapted to ensure that we're continuing to support children and families was really key. And just to emphasise that point, that the need for senior leaders and decision makers to meet frequently, as we have done with the Safeguarding Partnership Executive on a 3-week weekly basis, and we continue to do that, to coordinate those responses in a really fluid and quite complex period, again has been vital. So we've got that golden thread from your strategic decision making is then reflecting operational practice and vice versa. It's probably an obvious point, but the fourth one down, I think the ability to use technology in more innovative ways, such as delivering conferences and training, as seeing learning opportunities reach more practitioners than we would have ordinarily been able to do. And I can't really see us ever going back to just purely face-to-face training. I think there's clearly a value in that, because the downside is, well, the engagement, the ability to have Q&A is more reduced, but I think the accessibility of that training is a real learning point that the partnership has taken on, and as a result we are continuing now to digitise a lot of our typical face-to-face that we did deliver pre-March. And there's a continued need to promote those safeguarding messages, and I will come on to what we're looking at for the Safeguarding Everyone campaign kind of 6 months on will look like. But in terms of how to raise safeguarding concerns amongst those who typically would not work with children and families is key. So final slide, and then I'll be to take comments and questions. Next steps, I've already executive continues to meet on a weekly basis. On a 3-weekly basis rather, sorry, and the focus for us at this moment in time is to ensure that our business as usual to be satisfied, children's vulnerabilities are reduced, and there's a particular focus on children not attending school. So, and I've bracketed some of those particular elements. So missing from education, those children that are electively home educated, and those that are shielding or self-isolating due to COVID-19. And this is something that we have just recently started to really pick up. So some of the arrangements that we are looking to introduce, that there will be a time-limited working group, and that will consist of the education and inclusion team and the local authority, a member of my team who's a safeguarding education advisor, and additional partners to review the arrangements in place for children missing from education and those that are electively home educated, to enable us to assure that those arrangements are appropriate in these times, and if they aren't, what do we need to introduce to make sure we can have sight on those children that aren't attending school. There is a consideration if there needs to be additional resource into the electively home education team, to put support in place for families who have decided to home educate up until Easter, because we've picked up on the statistics there that there has been an increase, nationally, and likewise for us in Wakefield around electively home educated in this current period. We are also looking at a short piece of work on shielding children, and to ascertain how they are picked up through other mechanisms, and public health intelligence data can help provide that breakdown. We are looking at recirculating or relaunching the Safeguarding is Everyone's Business campaign 6 months on, because I don't think this needs to be a static campaign that we ran that in April time. I think there is value in ensuring that we are redistributing those messages, particularly to those that aren't always working directly with children and families. And that is something that the business unit, the team that I lead within the Safeguarding Children Partnership will lead on. We are looking at some assurance work as well in more detail. So we will be carrying out a deep dive audit to assure and assess services ability across the district to universally identify children at risk of harm who may otherwise not be known to statutory services. So what we're saying generally is that those children that are already open to services, we've got some sight there. but what about those children and families where they're not currently known to services? How are we ensuring that if there is an escalation in their need, how are we picking that up in the context of the pandemic? So that deep dive audit work across services will help us pick up that picture and assure ourselves of what that looks like for us in Wakefield. And that audit will also provide a local response to Vicky Ford, who is the MP and also the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Education, who's requested for local authorities, along with safeguarding partners, to undertake a review of the current circumstances of children and families who have recently stepped down from child protection plans, so shown some good progress, and have had a new baby in the last 6 months, because nationally what we've picked up on is that there has been serious incidents involving newborn babies that have led to a significant injury or tragically to their death. Now, there's nothing currently in terms of Wakefield that we've picked up in terms of those local issues, but we do want to assure ourselves of some of the themes that are coming through nationally. So if it's okay there, Councillor Jones and the committee, I'll pause there, and more than happy to take comments and questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think there'll be an award there for the mammoth presentation that you've carried out over these last 2 sessions, but I would have to say this is an absolutely vital element of the work of Children's Services, in terms of ensuring that all our children can be as safe as possible. I'm glad you raised the issue about homeschooling, because obviously the figures nationally is about 38% increase, if I'm right, if I recall that. Have you any ideas as yet what that figure is in Wakefield, Jonathan?
I don't, Councillor Jones, no, in terms of a data set. I know I can look at picking that up with our education the local authority. The artist got that figure, or even Vicky, who's on the call as well, Vicky Schofield, that could provide that. But I'm not sure, I'm afraid.
That's fine. Yeah, I know it's always difficult when somebody throws a question like that at you. So, but nevertheless, thank you very much. Andy, over to you.
And that really is the theme I was going to try and ask about. I mean, in terms of activity and in terms of things that have been done, it's commendable. And I also appreciated the fact that you talked about the Ofsted comment about the comparison with similar authorities and how the rate of referrals for Wakefield appears to remain stable, whereas other similar authorities perhaps they've struggled quite considerably with COVID. What I would have liked to have seen during the presentation, though, was some interim detail on the impact of all this activity and how well things are going. I note that you have said that you're going to be reporting back later, or there will be a report with regard to the detail of the children and the families where you're trying to reduce vulnerabilities. But it would have been helpful, I think, to have had some interim ideas, some idea of the interim figures of the impact of all this activity, which is commendable in itself, but it's not being done for the sake of the activity, it's being done for the impact.
No, thank you, Andy, and I think that's a really fair point and a valuable point. I think that, I suppose, the arrangements that we have put in place across the pandemic was to ensure our business as usual arrangements can be applied as much as possible, and where we're not able to provide those business as usual, what do those adaptations look like? Now, the work that was presented in the presentation in October time did provide the arrangements that we put in place from a children's services perspective and a health perspective as well. Now, I suppose when we look more broadly, that there will always be safeguarding need, as we'll all be aware of. And I think that this presentation, or the pitch in which we look to put this together, was to put those arrangements in place to ensure that we're not having any major spikes, because we've we've not had the right arrangements in place, or we've not made the necessary adaptations. I think we can take some assurance that where we've seen a continued offer in terms of service delivery, all of that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't have put in place what we've gone through in this presentation. But I fully appreciate in terms of impact, that may well, I suppose, difficult to ascertain, but it's sometimes probably preventing something so it doesn't happen. And I think that's probably more difficult to measure in terms of impact, apart from some of the statistical data, like with the referrals into the integrated front door, that they've stabilised. We've managed to ensure with the locality cluster meetings that we've had those multi-agency meetings still maintained. We managed to maintain any kind of statutory meetings such as strategy discussions, initial child protection conferences, etc. So I do fully take that point on board. I think the impact side, though, is very much around preventing any spikes within the pandemic, which I do think we've been able to deliver on.
Right. Thank you for that, Jonathan. I know that obviously other comments can come through during Vicky's presentation. Are there any more questions from members of the committee? Okay. Right. Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. We look forward, obviously, to the further comments coming back at a later date as to how progress is moving on. So thank you very much for your work on that one. Right, can we move on please to agenda item 8, which is the vital signs report, agenda pages 17 to 26. And I'm aware that Vicky has to leave very quickly, so Vicky, over to you.
Morning everybody. You've all got the paper, colleagues, so I don't propose to go through it in huge detail, and I'm sure, as usual, you'll have questions that you want to ask me. I guess the headlines are that, by and large, you can see that performance has remained relatively consistent, and that the improvements we began to embed at the beginning of the year have generally sustained, which we're really pleased about. I think you can see that the timeliness of key processes at KPI 2 shows that we're consistently performing above 80% in all of those areas and in line or above with our targets. You can see, I think, that caseloads and open cases are generally in a good place. They have reduced slightly. They're coming a little bit higher in the last couple of months, which is what we would expect and consistent with schools reopening. And you can see that visits are completed on time by and large. Personal and case-based supervision is taking place and has continued to take place through the pandemic. And what we're really pleased about, if I draw your attention to KPI 7B, the quality assurance activity, is that our sampling of practice indicates that we are seeing an improvement in practice, which has now been sustained since sort of the beginning of the year. You've obviously got the information there. The one area of work that I will draw your attention to that we know needs more focus is in relation to this issue around re-referrals to the children's front door. So that's issues that come back to social care services within a 12-month period of our involvement being concluded. And we've got slightly higher incidence of that than we would like. 29% in October, and our target is 20%. There's a whole programme of activity taking place in relation to that. Lots of sampling work, lots of focus in services around quality and nature of practice, and how we step down cases to the more to the universal practitioners and to the early help hubs. And that's been considered at the improvement board in detail on 2 previous occasions. But with regard to this vital signs report, that's the particular issue, I guess, that we know we need to work further on. But unless you've got any questions, I guess that's what I was proposing to say today.
Right, thank you, Vicky. Are there any questions from any other members before I just ask the odd question? Kathy, and then Andy, and then Catherine. Right, Kathy first, you go first.
I was just wondering about 4.10 when it's talking about exclusions, and I was just wondering how the cluster-based exclusion panels are working. I know it's early days, and when we might sort of see a positive impact in a reduction of exclusions because of those panels that are meeting.
Okay, I think it is early days. I think you're right. We've had this going now for a couple of months, really. And obviously I'm not the person best placed to speak about the educational arrangements. I guess what I would say is that we would hope to see some impact from that relatively quickly, though obviously I think the impact will grow over time. I don't know whether...
Yes,
Yeah,
if I could
yeah,
just very briefly add to that. I mean, they're very, very strange times, aren't they? So in some ways, it's difficult to compare like with like. But we know that for this first term, we've had significantly fewer exclusions than we did at the same time last year. The inclusion panels have started to run, and so far the feedback is very positive, and that the ownership of those children and young people is really coming to fruition across the whole system. So I think it's one to watch, but I think early indications are very positive.
Thank you. Andy, your turn.
Thank you. It's to do with exclusions as well. I mean, I note that on the KPI 8, and it kind of ties in a little bit with the October 19, in that it doesn't state that the number of incidents have reduced. The number of children involved remains, looks as though it's pretty much the same, and that's possibly just something to keep an eye on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what I would say as well is that, as Beata says, these are unusual times, and I think what we know is that many children had quite some number of weeks or months out of formal education in the way that they would have typically been used to receiving that. So some young people will have found it more difficult to integrate back into schools, and I think the figures actually are going to be taking account of some different arrangements in schools and the fact that children have had such a long time out. So it is difficult to compare what's happening this year with what happened last year. But as Beata says, we've got these arrangements in place now, and it's one to watch, I think.
All right, thanks. Catherine.
I've got a question on exclusions as well. So, what some of the exclusions that have been overturned, are the majority of those from the same school, or is it a variety of schools? That's one question. My next question is, when we're looking at EHCP care plans, and they've gone up recently, have they significantly gone up in the last few years continually?
I think it's a steady increase of around 10% a year, in line with what's happening nationally. So they are going up year on year. We are expecting, of course, a review of the arrangements for SEND nationally as well. But I think we're very much in line with national. Maybe just worth saying that despite that, actually the timeliness of us issuing the plans is still well above 90% within the timescale, so that's relatively good performance. In terms of the exclusions overturned, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. We'll provide a written response to that.
Can I just come back on that, please? If it is one or two particular schools, do we do extra training with them?
We would. The team is working with schools in those circumstances very specifically and in a very targeted way. We will include that in the response, if that's okay.
Thanks, Beata.
Right, thank you for that. Can I just ask a couple of questions about KPI 2, please, Vicky? One is, what does it mean by the 3 pods?
Sorry, let me just find it, David.
Sorry.
In the mesh.
Yeah.
So there are, basically means that the staff have been organised into 3 specific groups, managed by one manager. It's the equivalent of a team. They're just calling their teams pods. The previous arrangements for the MASH have been that there's been a group of staff who've all been managed by 3 managers. So what we've tried to do is basically split the work into 3, with one manager overseeing a third. It means things are more efficient.
All right, thanks. The other thing is that on the graph, there's yellow isn't identified in the key at the bottom. So
No, I see that. I could probably do a process of elimination if you give me a minute.
No, it's all right. It's just obviously.
It's child protection
conferences. Yeah.
Right.
Child protection case conferences held within 15 working days, David.
Right. I think it's probably then that my next question's coming on to that one. Where there's been a delay then in the ICPCs.
Yes.
Does that create a problem then for attendees who are from other organisations?
No, I don't think a delay creates that problem. I think the key performance indicator is there so that we are very timely in understanding what level of risk there is to children when they have gone through an investigation, a joint investigation with police and social care. And so that we put in place the right plan to keep them safe with the right multi-agency arrangements to support that. So that's what the 15-day timescale relates to. I guess what I can say is this fluctuates a little bit. It's unusual that we do this 100% of the time on time, though on occasion we have, and sometimes there is a practical reason around why a case conference can't be held within the 15 days, but it's very small numbers. You're talking about 1 or 2 families that little dip affects, and we know which those cases are, and we understand the circumstances around that. So we do keep a very close eye on that.
Okay, thanks. Catherine, back to you.
Yeah, looking at KPI 3, we've got a 7% increase in children in care. So when you look at KPI 4 and the number of cases that social workers have got, has that gone up significantly, especially since COVID, and we might have more children in care through domestic abuse or any other reason? So has it dramatically increased the workload of the social workers?
No, the workload of the social workers has reduced, Catherine, and the numbers of cases in the service overall have reduced. I think if you look at KPI 4 in some more detail, what you'll see there is that the vast majority of our case holding social workers are operating at caseloads below the target of 20. We've got a very small number who are between 20 and 25, and the others are largely around children's first hubs. So we're actually really pleased with our average case holding rates and our actual case holding rates right now. And what we think is that creates a little bit of capacity if, as we expect, numbers begin to increase a little bit over the next few months, given that children are more visible and back at school. But actually, no, the volume in the system has reduced rather than increased. I think on KPI 3, what you're referring to is that slight increase in case holding in the children in care team. That's not actually reflective of an increase in children in care numbers overall. It just means that slightly more cases are being held in that part of the service as opposed to another part.
Thanks, Vicky.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, I've gone on to mute. You've done my job for me, Vicky. Thanks. Right, any more questions for Vicky? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Obviously, things are progressing, and obviously, we recognise that yes, I've just noticed that as well, Cynthia, that we're all into tier 3, or back in tier 3. The service has been under great stress, and strain because of COVID. So I think it's been really good. Obviously, you can convey that to all the teams that well done in order to keep this service going in the way it has done. So thank you for that.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
Okay. If we can go on to agenda item number 9, senior leadership visits. Obviously, this has been a bit of a problem. The total number of visits was 7 were made and attended by 18 visitors. No visits have been undertaken during Q1 during COVID-19, and any feedback has been come back to for any consideration actions by managers. Committee members at the SLVP is open to them by emailing the senior leadership visit programme at wakefield.gov.uk, and I think we are sort of planning, or sort of giving a little bit of a start of a shopping list to Lynn for Catherine and I to do some of this. I think we're going to have to move into more of these conference calls, so I think that is something that we will need to do. So if anybody would like us to, or them to be arranged, and I think that will be the way forward, certainly for the foreseeable future, as we are going into tier 3, which obviously was to be expected, as Cynthia has said. Okay, are there any comments about the leadership programme? Thank you very much, Vicky. Yes, you can go. Okay, right, so can we go on to agenda item 10, which is the corporate parenting minutes. Obviously, overview and scrutiny monitor the effectiveness of corporate parenting committee in supporting councils and officers in their corporate responsibilities and delivering better outcomes for children and young people. The most recent meeting was held on the 7th of October, and you have got the minutes of that meeting on page 33. This was obviously the first meeting since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and the content was largely discussed as last month's scrutiny meeting, when it was attended by the chair and the head of service. Has anybody got any comments they'd like to make, or any questions? Okay. Oh, Celia, over to you.
Yeah, actually, I've just been wondering where I can put this in, but we had a very good meeting with a number of young people last evening from the Corporate Parenting Committee, and it was totally delightful, and I just couldn't believe the quality, first of all, of being able to get this together with so many different people. So really congratulations to all involved. But one of the messages that came out was that there is a significant degree of IT poverty amongst the young people in care, and I do feel, I don't know if this is the right place to take it, but I do think we need to challenge that, particularly with what we've all heard today, this wonderful presentation today to us all, about the importance of IT for people. So I'm just wondering how we can take this forward, really. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Celia. Okay, well, obviously that one will get noted down, and obviously we can make any sort of communication on that one. So look forward to that one. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Yes.
Just to say, I mean, obviously I reported at the beginning about the general campaign around digital poverty, but I'll take this particular issue back and provide a response.
Thank you, Beate. Are there any other comments or questions on agenda item 10? Right, Celia. All right, okay, thanks for that. Right, can we move on to agenda item number 11, which is Executive Leaders Forward Plan of Key Decisions. It's rarely that obviously we, or the Children's Services gets mentioned in this, but there is a notice of a procurement of a new children's education management system, which is due to be considered by Cabinet next month. In the light of that, I did ask for a briefing note on that, which is to do with the central education management system. I think it's not an overly technical paper, but I think it's one which is may well be worthwhile sort of circulating to all members rather than sort of going through any sort of technical details. My only question would be, and there's obviously one BRC to go back possibly, is that does the proposed system, would that be able to talk, or does it need to talk to the our new system that will obviously be opening up at some time in the future? Do they need to talk to each other, or do they run parallel to each other? That's my only question. That's just a sort of technical question. But I think the rest of it, I think obviously the paper could well be emailed out to you all so that you are aware of that.
If I could very briefly respond to that, if you want me to. So this particular report acknowledges that the current system is coming to the end of its contract term, and this is permission to go out to procurement. So what sits behind that is a specification which really talks about what does the new system need to do and deliver. The ability to communicate with the social care record system and, if possible, with partner systems, going to be absolutely crucial in that. So it'll be one of the key deciding factors to who will be successful in being put forward. And some of the current providers probably will want to bid as well. So we would look at all of those submissions once we're at that stage, but it is a key criterion.
Right, good, excellent. I think you've answered my question then, so thank you very much for that. Are anything else, any other questions on that matter, on agenda item 11? Stuart, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on that point, I think it's really good to hear that it's being considered about joining up with partner systems, etc. Will that be in thinking about partner systems that's outside Wakefield local authority and into our neighbouring local authorities as well as partners?
I think the starting point will probably be our own partners locally, because but what increasingly is happening, that systems offer portals where you can then make sure that systems talk to each other. So I think that would probably be a further stage of development as the need arises.
Yeah, and I think obviously the opportunity there, and obviously some partners do cross other boundaries and into other counties as well as it happens. So, and that portal thing is available. I think it's important, and as other areas also develop their systems, just being aware of that.
Right, thank you. Andy?
I echo that. I mean, one of the biggest problems that big organisations have is the IT system and also the compatibility with others. There's so many places that have gone down the wrong route in terms of the fact, I mean, the whole district, isn't it? We've got the mayoral system that's been started up in which we're going to be a part of. Do we have the expertise within Wakefield to be able to make those sorts of judgments? And if not, where do we go to actually seek that kind of expertise? Because this is going to be a lot of money being spent on something that's going to be crucial.
If I could just comment on that. So the council overall has a digital strategy which was informed by a very detailed piece of work probably about 12 months ago or so. So it's very clear now that what the council is aspiring to is one system that is largely cloud-based and that can meet increasing needs of different council services. So we move away from trying to buy bespoke systems that just solve one problem, but that anything that is now purchased is part of and viewed as part of the wider corporate strategy to make sure that it fits together. And with that, as part of that, our we have a service director who's in charge of that and who does bring the expertise to us to make sure that that we have that to rely on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Beata, and I could sort of fully support that because I know obviously the journey that the service has gone down in terms of making previous procurement decisions, and I think certainly in the journey that's been taken in the last 2 years there's a very different approach to that now. So fingers crossed. Obviously it's a challenging time, but we'll obviously be a much more informed decision this time on whichever route we take. So thank you for that. Okay, if there are any more comments or questions, then we'll go to agenda item 12, which is always the best one, I think, which is date and time of the next meeting, which is Thursday the 7th of January. It's 2021 at 10 a.m. and will be held remotely. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and I'm going to say this again, which I tend to do every year. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody, and let's see what we come up with next year. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, and to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.